So thank you for joining me. My name is Scott Brady and I'm the owner of Progressive Property Management. And if you're watching right now, you're here at the Renter State website. I created this website about a year ago because of all the trends that were happening in the state of California and the real potential of California becoming a renter state and what you as a property owner can do to prepare for that and how we can help you prepare for it. So we're going to spend a little over an hour talking about what's going on in the state of California. As I speak to you today, it is September 12th, and we just had a couple statewide bills pass, which the governor will sign, which is going to affect rental properties in the state. So let's get to it. Let's talk about the coming, or if not already here, California renter state. When I say renter state, that is basically saying that there are more renter households than owner households. And historically, that has not been the case. Historically, we've had more owners and renters, and whoever is really, in charge, whoever's the majority of voters, kind of control all policies of the state. And what you're seeing now, that's changing, and that we have more renters, and those renters are voters, and elected officials want to please those voters. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today: is how do we get to this situation as a renter state, and what the trends are. So here are the big trends. The bottom line, as we already talked about, there are just more and more households that are renting rather than buying. Why is that happening? That's a good question. We'll have a couple slides on that. We have a housing crisis in California. We're not building enough homes. And because they're not building enough homes, the prices go up. And because the prices go up, people can't afford to buy, and they have become renters. The people who create housing recognize the fact there's a shortage of housing, particularly rental housing, and they build that. So you build more rental housing for renters, and that creates less housing for owner-occupied. We're approaching the point that will be more renters than owners in the state of California. Whether we like it or not, elected officials are pandering to the masses, and that means the voters. And we definitely have seen in the last 10 years where we never talked about statewide rent control or just cause eviction, and we'll talk about those terms. They're law now. Now, they don't affect all properties yet, but I would suggest to you they may in the future. You see a lot of money right now in the state of California, banks and Wall Street and big investors. There's something called REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, and they're kind of like a stock market for the housing industry. And they're building lots of rental properties in California. For every 5 rental properties being built right now, you're having 1 owner-occupied. And the average owner-occupied housing unit is selling for, we're in Orange County, is selling for over $900,000. So you can almost build 3 rental units for the same price of the $900,000. We're not going to talk a whole lot about technology acceleration, but it's real, and it's going to affect our society. And when it comes to housing, I think it's going to create a lot more renters. For every 1 job created by Amazon, 5 retail jobs are eliminated. And those are people that maybe in the past could buy, they're not buying anymore. So I call something the renter tipping point. So what's that point when all of a sudden a city or a state starts adopting the laws and the policy of the renters and not the owner-occupied people? And that is the tipping point. And we're at that tipping point right now in California. There's a high correlation between the percent of households that are renters and rent control. In this slide, you'll see that West Hollywood is now nearly 80% of the households are renters, and they were one of the first cities to implement rent control. Santa Monica, you can see. So that tipping point, certainly when 50% of the population become renters, we start seeing a clamoring for rent control. You see it, have already seen it in the last since 1994. So, the first rent control law was instituted in 1978, and then we saw a number of them in the 90s, and I think we're going to see more in the next few years. What's interesting is that you would think, well, okay, I get why renters like rent control. So on this slide, you can see that 65% of renters favor rent control. But what is truly alarming here is that even homeowners support rent control, which is really odd. So in this survey, 55% of homeowners supported rent control. And I think the reason is if you own a home, you don't intend to rent it. You don't really mind that people who do rent have rent control. It's not doesn't affect you personally, But of course, what they don't realize is that it will affect them personally, because a lot of people do convert their houses into rentals, and then you're going to be subject to the laws you know that are out there. So this is a very interesting slide. Not surprisingly, vast majority of Democrats support rent control, 75%, and more of our state is becoming Democratic, and they really control now. They absolutely control. They have a supermajority in the state Senate, and they control the Assembly as well. And of course, Gavin Newsom is a Democrat as well. So all this begs the question is, where did all the homeowners go? How do we go from 60% of households being homeowners to only, now almost down to 50%? And that's a big number. We have, over 40 million people in the state. So we have about 15 million households. And that's saying that something like 1.5 million households fewer are owner-occupant now. That's a lot of people. So where'd they go? This slide's really interesting because it shows you the trends in a very stark contrast. So it used to be, meaning let's call it the 80s, as rates increased, home ownership went down. And that makes sense. As rates went from 7 or 8% to 12% in the early 80s, people simply couldn't afford to buy, so they chose to rent. But as rates went down, as you see in this slide, by 1992, you can see that rates had gone down significantly. Home ownership went way up, and that also makes sense. I don't know about you, but my first house I bought was in 1988. It was a $150,000 townhome. My second home I bought in 92 was a $250,000 new construction house in Placentia. My third house, which was a 3,000 square foot 3-car garage, was about $300,000. Those same homes today, that last house I referenced, would be $1 million. So rates may be moving down, but here's a scary thing. If you look at our current year, home ownership is moving down. So what happens when rates move back up again? Well, I think it's going to exacerbate the renter situation, and people simply can't afford to buy at these prices. So that is a very scary trend. As I mentioned earlier, always look where the money's going. And right now, the big money in California is behind multi-unit. If you drive around Orange County or particularly Los Angeles, you'll see a wrap product. The classic example is by Angel Stadium, Platinum Triangle. That was supposed to be owner-occupied condos. None of them are owner-occupied. And the wrap product is a big garage, made of concrete, of course, and it's surrounded by many rental units made of wood, and they can go up now 5-6 stories of wood construction. So you have 300 apartment units basically in one location. And right now in Anaheim, you might have 10 or 15 of those. That's 3,000 units, probably 5,000 people, and these aren't poor and downtrodden. The rents over in Platinum Triangle run, $2,500, $3,500. These are people with money, and these are voters. And even if you're a good Republican, if you're a renter, you may start supporting rent control laws because it benefits you personally. So there's a lot of money, and like I said, for every 5 units now being built as a rental, 1 is being built as a single-family home. This has been talked about a lot. I know when I got out of college, I'll confess to you, I'm 56 years old, and when I got out of college in 1987 or so, if you hadn't bought a home by 3 or 4 years out of college, you had explaining to do in the dating circuit. The younger generation is just not buying the same level as they used to be. It's a huge drop off, particularly since 2008, which is ironic since we've had a great real estate market the last 10 years. The only demographics still buying at the same pace as they have in the past are people who are 65 and older. All the other age groups are not buying in the same level they used to. I think when it comes down to it, this is a good slide for this. The highest rate of home ownership in the entire country is West Virginia. And of course, the lowest is California and New York. We're hovering at 55, and the prediction within 10 years, we will possibly be below 50% owner occupied. And I think the reason is in West Virginia, the average home price is $150,000, let's say. So if you can come up with 3%, $5,000, you can buy a home, and it's actually cheaper to buy than it is to rent in West Virginia. Well, that's not true in California. With the average home price running at $750,000, you put 3% down, it's still far cheaper to rent that home for $3,000 a month than it is to buy it with 3% down and have a $5,000 a month mortgage. Even if you put 20% down, it still might not have been penciled. So There's no doubt that unless home prices drop significantly in California, nobody's predicting that you're going to continue to have a low home ownership rate. Well, this is arguably not surprising as well. Elected officials like to stay elected, and they are there to reflect their constituents. And if your constituents are renters and they're suffering from higher rents and they're suffering from evictions and they're suffering from homelessness, then you're going to vote in an expedient way for them. So it's usually very easy to have annual inspections, and you can see generally in the past it's been the hardest thing to get approved and passed politically is rent control. Well, as of yesterday, that just passed statewide. Now, it doesn't affect all real estate yet, and we're going to talk about that, but it does affect a lot of units in the state of California. A real sea change happened when Gavin Newsom was elected. Governor Brown was kind of a conservative and didn't believe in big change in the state. That's not true with Newsom. He's always been a big supporter of big causes, gay marriage, electric cars, legalizing marijuana. And he's made it clear since he's taken office last year that he wants to increase this housing stock. I don't know how he can do that as governor, but what he can do as governor is pass laws that protect tenants, and he's definitely been true to his word on that. He did guarantee that if they did pass a good package on rent stability, not rent control, rent stability, he would sign it, and he did say, as of yesterday, he intends to sign the bill that was passed that we're going to discuss a little bit later. So here is that bill. It's called AB 1482. It was approved yesterday, and these are the changes they made, and this affects anybody who owns rental property in the state of California. If not today, then possibly down the road. Let's get into that bill. I call it the first shot over the bow. This is not going to be the last bill passed on rent control and tweaking rent control. It's the first one, and it's a big one. So the first thing you need to know is that it's a 5% cap. It's called a rent cap. So you can only increase your rents 5% over the Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index has been running right now about 2.1, and it's the lowest it's been in many, many years. So that says that you could increase your rents if your property is impacted by this bill. You could increase your rent 7.2%. That's not bad. Most of our owners, particularly ones that don't hire us, they're really hesitant to increase their rents even 3%. Because here's my opinion about you guys, is that if your tenant's a good tenant, and if your tenant's taking care of the property, you feel like, I don't want to scare the tenant away. He's taking care of my asset. It's an important asset to you. So 5% doesn't look too bad, does it? It only affects multi-unit buildings. So it's got to be 2 units or more in a property you don't live in. The building has to be 15 years or older. But any property, including single-family homes that are owned by a corporation, so some of you do hold your properties in a corporation, and specifically owned by a REIT, a real estate investment trust, which is a type of corporation, are included. What's included? So here's the good news. If you own a single family home or town or condo in your name, you're excluded. Even if you own 4 or 5 properties. So you can own 10 single family homes in your name or your trust and you're okay. And if you live in 1 unit, like an owner occupied duplex, you're also excluded. The bad part about this is the first time that just cause eviction has been passed, definitely on a statewide level. So let's explain if you don't know. Just cause eviction says if your tenant pays as agreed and behaves as agreed, you cannot take possession of your property back. So you can only evict somebody for just cause, for non-payment, for a breach of contract, for a crime they committed in your property. But otherwise, you can't remove them. With this bill, if you want to remove them, because maybe they're just difficult, maybe they're just hard to work with, maybe you just want your property back, then you have to pay them 1 month's rent, either pay them after they move out, or you can have them not pay the last month's rent. So this is really a relocation assistance, but it really is a form of just cause eviction. Because the way it was before this bill was passed, you bought this rental property. It's your property. It's your personal property, and you have the right to do with it as you see fit. And nobody should tell you how if you have to keep a tenant or not. Well, this is the first step in removing private property rights. The next bill that is going to be approved today, like I said, it's September 12th, and will be signed is Mandatory Section 8. So Section 8, if you don't know, is one of the biggest federal programs out there, and it helps people who don't have enough income to rent property. So let's say you only make $1,000 a month, you apply to Section 8, you prove to them your income's only $1,000, and then what they do is they give you a voucher. And they say, if you go find a property that's participating in the program, we will pay $1,500 of the rent and you kick in a third of your income. So if you're only making $1,500, you kick in $500, we'll kick in $1,000, you're good to go. And so a lot of owners don't want to participate in Section 8. And the reason is you're really coming into a contract with a government agency, and before your tenant can take possession, they have to do an inspection, they have to approve the property, and if the repairs are made, they can tell you to make those repairs. More importantly, they tell you how much your rent is, and then if you want to have an increase, they have to agree to the increase. So it's really just getting in a relationship with a government agency you may not want to. With this law, you cannot discriminate based on Section 8. Okay, so if a tenant comes to you and says, I want to rent your $15 property, they don't have to ask anymore, do you accept Section 8? You have to accept Section 8, so all you can do is look at their credit. You can look at their history. You can look at their payment history of their last rental, but you cannot deny because they are a Section 8 candidate. And if you were to deny, say, I don't want to do a Section 8, that is a fair housing violation. And this is important to remember, that if you violate fair housing, which is a federal law, you've now just discriminated against somebody because of their source of income. The first time fine is $19,797. The second time fine, so you do it once, you do it to somebody else a year later, 2 years later, that fine is $49,467 and goes up from there. And that's just the fine. Okay, now you have to hire an attorney. The victim, the person who applied for your rental, is probably going to be able to go into the rental, or you're going to have to pay for whatever they're paying now. So your costs can be incredibly high. This is true for all property. The good news is if you have a single family home in Orange County rent for $2,600, that's not going to qualify for Section 8. But if you own a multi-unit building and you have rents that are lower than that, they may. And now with Section 8, they can do an annual inspection on your property. They can call out issues that you have to repair, you have to deal with. Tenant doesn't need to ask for it anymore. So I think you realize this could be really a sticky wicket for a lot of people. The last two things that have happened legislatively was that Los Angeles County, so not Los Angeles City, so there are cities within Los Angeles already have rent control. Santa Monica, West Hollywood, a few others. This is the county-owned land. Well, they just passed their own rent control, and even with this bill, a local entity can still pass their own rent control, and they can make it more egregious. They can make it tighter than what the state just approved. And this is a good example of that. So they approved rent caps, but rather than being 5% over CPI, which is the state bill, theirs it says it's 3% over CPI if the CPI is 1 to 3%. But I love this. If the CPI is 3 to 8%, it's a CPI. So if the CPI is 3.2% next year, the maximum you can raise rent in Los Angeles County is 3.2%. This covers all multi-units again in 1994 and older. And I love this. If you own property in Los Angeles County, you've got to register. All owners must register. And then if you want to get rid of a tenant, you have to give them relocation assistance, which is in line with rent control in other cities in LA, which is anywhere from $8,500 to $21,200. Long Beach in June passed something called relocation assistance. So their argument is that if we if the owner has to pay financially to remove a tenant, they may not do so as quickly. So in this situation, if a tenant's been there for 12 months or more, or if you try to raise the rents 10%, well, that's going to be illegal now with the new rent control. But if you do that, then you've got to pay a relocation fee. So your tenant, you decide, tenant don't want to rent the property out to somebody else. It's a 2-bedroom property. You have to write them a check for $4,185. Ouch. And you have to pay that. So you give them notice. You got to pay them within 10 days. Half of that within 10 days of the notice you give them to vacate, and the rest once they move out. Good news again, if it's 4 units or less are excluded, and of course older in 1994. Still, that is pretty egregious. And I think you're going to see more cities adopt relocation assistance, maybe legal assistance. We'll talk about some of that stuff a little later. So what are the trends? I would say the trends aren't good. I think this is the first step in a very long journey. There's Northern California. They had something called the CASA Compact that Governor Newsom loves, and it talks about rent caps and just cause eviction. But here's the key: it talks about legal assistance. This is true in Oregon. So you as a homeowner will pay a fee, call it an annual fee, call it $100, and that fee is going to go to a pot of money. And then when you will to evict a tenant, even as for cause, the tenant didn't pay as agreed, tenant doesn't behave as agreed, you go to evict them, then that local entity is going to hire an attorney to defend the tenant you're evicting. So you're going to pay for the defense of the person you're trying to evict. I've talked to attorneys. They say, you give me $1,500, I can make an eviction take 3 months longer. And I think that's something we may see as well. So I would say, what to expect? What should you expect the next 10 years? Let's talk about that. I think these are the 6 biggest trends we're going to see. In some form or fashion, you're going to see all 6 of these come down the pipe, whether on a state level or a local level, a city level. So just cause eviction, we just had it. But rather than just being for multi-unit, I think you're going to see just cause eviction for all properties, single family, condos, townhomes. I think the rent caps you see on the state level, the 5% over CPI could be tightened up. In certain cities like Berkeley, they have like 1% over CPI. I've already talked about relocation assistance. So once you get just cause eviction, you still want to get rid of the tenant, you're going to have to pay the tenant to leave your property. We talked about legal assistance. You're going to have to pay for the defense of the person you're evicting. Owner registration, I don't see how they can do a lot of these things without you, the owner of rental property, registering with the state, so they know who you are and where your rental is. And there's no doubt we're going to see inspections annually certainly at a citywide level. I think the biggest issue with this newest bills that were passed is that I do believe, like a typo, I do believe there's a slippery slope ahead. I think cities are going to be emboldened now. So let's take Santa Ana as an example. We already have statewide rent control. That affects everywhere. Villa Park, and it's 5% over CPI, but there's really 1 month relocation assistance. And I think you're going to see local entities decide, you know what, let's increase the relocation assistance, or let's decrease the amount over CPI for a rent increase. I think you're going to see a lot of cities move ahead with their rent control measures. Why is there rent control? So there's got to be reasons why this is being pushed. You as a homeowner or as an investment property owner might think, well, this is insane. How can the government tell me how much I can increase my rent? Because the way it works now, you don't want to get rid of a tenant who pays as agreed. You have loss of rent. You got to pay to get a new tenant. You got to clean up the property. It costs you thousands of dollars. You only get rid of a tenant because they're not a good tenant. You keep good tenants, you get rid of bad tenants. But there's got to be a reason why all these people are voting for all these measures. These are the ones I could find. So I think the patty positives is initially you could see the increase of affordable housing stock. So once you pass rent control and a tenant gets in your property, particularly if you have just cause eviction, they're going to stay there longer. So you have that housing now becomes considered affordable. Before it was free market, now it's affordable because it's got rent control involved. No doubt you have stable tenancies. We hear stories of tenants in San Francisco who's had rent control now since '78, who have been there 40 years. Why would a tenant leave if they don't have to fix anything? You really can't increase their rent materially, so you stabilize. In the end, rent control is a form of social engineering where you allow people to stay in communities longer, in the school system longer, in the community longer, because they have a good thing. Why would they want to move? You definitely create some stable income for you. It's like having Section 8. Tenants don't move, so you've got stable rental income, and you're gonna have less vacancies and less turnover. And arguably, they're better properties because now you have the government involved with inspections, and the tenant can easily go to a government agency and say, well, the property is in good condition. They inspect it, so arguably you have better properties. You get rid of slumlords, but there are negatives. So what are the negatives? We already talked about the big one, the loss of private property rights. And if people think owning investment property is not a good thing, they'll sell those properties. Builders won't build. You'll take your money and move to another state maybe. So let's go over the real negatives of rent control. There's a saying that no economists agree on anything, but they all agree on one thing, that rent control doesn't work. So why is that true? Why is it that everybody says it doesn't work? Categorically, they've been proven, still you have rent control. And the reason why it doesn't work is it's a flat out violation of your private property rights. It's your property, you paid for it, you should be able to do what you see fit. There's a statistic that says in San Francisco, 10% of investment property owners don't rent out their property because they don't want to deal with rent control. They don't want to put a tenant in they can never get rid of. They'd rather keep it vacant and lose that money than risk putting a tenant in that they have to keep the rest of their life. There's very little incentive for you to upgrade or improve your property, because we have a lot of clients that come in here. They'll have a tenant who's paying way below market, let's say $2,000. We have some rent. They rented a property for 30 years. The market rent's $2,500. They're paying $2,000. So they can't afford to pay more. So we'll give that tenant notice. Our owners will put in $10,000, $20,000 in that property, clean up the kitchen, make the bathroom nicer, whatever, repaint, refloor, and we can turn around rent for $2,500, $2,700. Well, there's no incentive to do that. If you put a $10,000 kitchen in, you can't raise the rent by $300 a month because of the rent caps. Over time, there's a shortage of affordable housing. More owners decide to sell their rental properties. More people don't build rental properties. And in the end, whoever gets in first wins, because there's no turnover. People just rent and never move. So over time, you actually lose housing. And then ironically, when that house comes up for rent because they decide to move or die, whatever, the rents go through the roof because there's no affordable rental properties. And I have a story in here, the third one. We had a client, and I'll tell this story briefly. We had a client who bought a multi-unit building in a rent-controlled city, and he knew he was in rent control, obviously, and he thought this is a good investment. It still makes pencils out for him. The day after he closed escrow, and he didn't know this, that the previous owner was friends with all the tenants and took care of all their needs and kind of lived around the corner. The tenants called the housing authority, Los Angeles Housing Authority, and said, "Hey, housing authority, the electrical here is not really good." So the housing authority comes out and agrees with them. It cost us, and we had a deadline. We had 2 months to put all new electrical in this property, and it cost my client like $25,000. He couldn't recoup that immediately. Right after we did that, the tenants called the housing authority again and said, "You know what, the plumbing's kind of wonky too." And the housing authority agreed and made him replumb. That was $10,000. So our client, in the course of 6 months, had to put $35,000 in our property and could not recoup it immediately. He finally did go to the housing authority, showed he put these improvements in, and they allowed him to increase, it's like 10 units, he's allowed to increase each unit's rent $10 a month. So $120 a year. He's recouping $1,200 a year. It will take him 30 years to recoup the cost that he spent in 6 months. So that's a problem. You have this housing authority, which becomes your third wheel. I do want to touch on Costa-Hawkins. It's still in existence. It hasn't been repealed. I think they're going to try. So the key about Costa-Hawkins was that these two gentlemen, a Republican and a Democrat, fashioned a bill in 1995, passed by the legislature, that said, great, if you want to do rent control, local cities, have at it. But you know what? It's got to be for buildings that are older than 94, and it's got to exclude single-family homes. So let's exclude the small investor. That passed. And I think it's a good bill, but I think it could be at risk of going away. The reason why Costa-Hawkins is so critical is that because it only allows properties to go into rent control older than 94, we still have a lot of new construction, a lot of new housing coming for rent at higher cost, but so what? People can rent the older stuff. And because it doesn't affect single-family homes, it kept the small investor out of it, so it's really just multi-unit buildings. If that's repealed, they tried to repeal it last year, they're going to make another run at it next year, and like I said, eventually I think you could see rent control affecting all properties. It's just bad for investment properties if they repeal Costa-Hawkins. It just discourages the construction of investment properties in California. People are just less incentivized. I say if it's better to rent than it is to buy, you can't increase my rent, I don't have to fix anything, you can't get rid of me, why buy? And by repealing it, I think it's bad for residential as well. and in the end, if you were Bill Costa-Hawkins, Katie barred the door. I think that accelerates the California renter state. What does California look like if only 40% of the people are owners and 60% are renters? What kind of laws do you think are going to be fashioned at that point? Does that threaten Prop 13? Tenants don't care about Prop 13. They're not paying the property tax. The owner is. And if this state became a state of renters, maybe Prop 13 is at risk. And, the ugly side of this entire debate, it's kind of rich against poor, it's old versus young, and it's not healthy for our state. And because we want renters to become owners. We want, poor to become rich. And if you take those incentives away, that may not happen. So in case you thought that somehow local rent control was dead, well, it's not. These are the cities that currently have rent control that passed over the years. There's a slew in the late 70s and a few in the 80s, and I think you have a lot of cities considering it. Now we'll see what happens with this new statewide rent control or rent cap with just cause eviction, but I think that could be something we see again. And this is really a kind of a summary page. What's the impact of rent control in a California renter state? So currently we have a lack of inventory for sale. Our real estate market's slowing down anyway because people are nervous that we're at the peak and there's a recession coming. And a lot of our owners are trapped by low property taxes. They don't want to sell because they got very low property taxes. We do have a lack of affordable housing and rentals. There is a disparity right now between property tax. You can have somebody who buys a home for $1 million today paying $10,000 a year next to somebody who bought a home for $100,000 40 years ago paying $100. Whatever, that happens. But there's definitely equality of rents because the free market decides rents, and there's equality of prices because free market determines prices. Well, with a renter state, with rent control, that ends. I think there could be, as boomers get squeezed out, you may see a lot of properties hit the market and prices come down. There's definitely more renters. You have fewer buyers because it's better to rent than it is to buy. You have a disparity of rents paid. So in a rent control city, you can have somebody who's been renting a property for 20 years paying a little, and somebody who just moves in paying twice as much. It's very common. And because of that, if you're buying a property that has rent control, you're going to pay less because you can't increase the rents. So you have a disparity of sales prices as well. And we talked about it, you just ultimately have a lack of rentals because as people move in the rentals, there's just not enough inventory. Not to scare everybody, but I definitely believe you're seeing this push as a society, whether it's successful or not, we'll see. But you're seeing a push for universal housing. The idea that everybody, no matter how much money they make, should have housing. Section 8's sort of like that, but if you expanded Section 8 for everybody and you force more people to allow people to move in with Section 8, that would affect that. You have to give a lot more money to it. You're hearing a lot of talk in this election about universal health care. That's a right. Everybody should have the right to health care. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's definitely a push. And another one you see a lot of, particularly with all the technology issues going on, is there's a lot of talk of driverless trucks. So in 20 years, what do you do with the 2 million truck drivers who are displaced by driverless trucks? Well, you have to give them income. They need money to survive. You may have to have some kind of universal basic income where everybody gets $1,000 a month. But these are sort of the three universals we see out there. Because you know what? There's no doubt right now there's change ahead. There's change. I think there is a possible recession. We do have a seismic shift going on with our renter state in California. We have technology change going on, real economic change, worldwide change. And so you've got to be prepared for it. So the rest of this presentation is to help you prepare for the inevitable now California renter state. Kind of looks like me. So I've been in the business in the real estate business since 97. And then I've been in the property management business for about the last 7 years. And we own a number of companies to help our clients achieve their financial goals. So are you ready? This is 2019. 2020 is right around the corner. But there's a lot of stuff happening. We'll talk briefly about the recession that a lot of people think is coming right now. I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but just kind of briefly touch upon it and how it affects you as an investment property owner. It might affect you also as a stock owner, but we're going to talk on the investment property side. You know, let's be honest, it's been a really good run. I lived through the recession with all of you in 07, 08, but we've recovered since then. This is now a very long run, but the way our society works, capitalism works, is that when things get too good and inflation starts rising, they tamper it down. And that's what causes the recessions. And not all recessions are bad, nor are they brutal. The 08 recession was tough. 07 recession was really tough. I don't think the next one's going to be it's going to pale in comparison to that, but it still will have an impact. So here's kind of the history of recent recessions. You might recognize a few of these. The only one we didn't really recognize in real estate was 2001 and 2002. And the reason for that was that's when they really started loosening the lending standards. And so by the time 2005 rolled around, we had the no income, no credit, and no down payment. And lenders are doing those loans. Those loans, you can't get those loans anymore. But it didn't affect real estate because people kept on buying with those really great loans. Of course, we all remember the Great Recession of 2007 and 9. So if you don't know what the recession is, quickly, it's 2 quarters of negative growth. It's not 5 years of misery like a Great Depression. It's 2 quarters of negative growth. So some of our recessions are really mild. It's 2 quarters and we move on, and some are very deep. But generally speaking, recessions are tough on people because unemployment goes up and people suffer. And people with debts can't cover those debts, and banks suffer. So it's just can be a tough time, certainly for certain industries. So how soon? I don't know if you've been reading the paper, but who reads the paper? I read mine on the iPad. But the bottom line is, most economists, 90% of all economists, believe we'll have some form of recession by 2021. Some think we'll even have it a lot of them think we'll have it by 2020. Economists agree on very little, so we'll see what happens. But there are some disconcerting trends happening right now on both the federal level and the state level. On the federal level, our debt will be $25 trillion by 2025. Why? This is important. It used to be in the good times, we paid down our debt, and we had recessions, we used the government to stimulate the economy by giving car rebates or tax cuts and whatnot. Well, we can't do that. We have too much debt. So if we're going to climb out of recession, we're going to have to do it on our own. And it's even worse for the state. I'm not going to get into the details on this, but we have a pension crisis. So in 1999, the state sweetened the pensions for all the police officers, most of the firemen, even a lot of teachers, so that if you work 25 years as a police officer, you could retire and get 75% of pay for the rest of your life. Okay, here's the problem. They've been able to spike that now to 90% of pay for the rest of your life in certain circumstances. So you become a police officer at 25, retire at 50, you work 25 years, but you could have 40 years of pension at the same pay as what you were making when you were employed. So, and that has to be paid by the state of California. In the ballot in 2020, there's a split roll measure we're going to hear a lot about, where residential property taxes won't be affected, or multi-unit even, but commercial, industrial, and retail will, and they'll be their property taxes will rise to their current values. Well, that will generate $12 billion in revenue for the state to help pay for the pensions. But if that measure is defeated, where's the money going to come to pay for the pensions? I don't think anybody has an answer. So how could it be? I don't think this next recession will be bad, but you never know. You walk into a recession, and sometimes you never know how deep it's going to be. Ironically, or thankfully, recessions are our time to shine, meaning the property management industry. I've heard many people, I have not been in the property management business in a recession, so this will be my first in property management. I have been in real estate a couple times, but things change with tenants and owners in a recession. The first thing that changes is tenants start stumbling. So the people that lose their jobs, yes, they're homeowners, but the majority of which are tenants. And when they're not getting paid, they can't pay their rent. So they stop paying and they start becoming difficult. It becomes a lot of tenants in a recession will move back home. They'll move in with another friend, and you have more vacancy. So it takes longer to find a suitable tenant because there are fewer of them out there. Rent prices, because there are fewer tenants, there's more vacancy, rent prices soften. And so you get a lot more people in the business, meaning you get a lot of people decide to rent their properties out rather than sell them at a discount. So that's more competition for you and for other investment property owners. We talked about the roommates. And then investors kind of jump in and buy properties at a discount and turn them into rentals. We saw that the last time, or the last recession. So what can you do as an owner? Okay, what can you do to prepare for the recession, for the California renter state, for all these trends? So here are the 8 ways you can get ready for the California renter state. So the first is you got to bring your rents to market. You can't lollygag anymore. So in Long Beach, you can increase your rents 10% without triggering that relocation package. I'm not saying go to 10%, but if you're 20% below market, certainly come up 5 or 7%. So you need to get your rents to market, because in your local city, they may say you can only raise your rents by CPI or 1% over CPI. So you want to make sure you're to market rent as quickly as possible. It's critical to find good tenants. If you don't care how you put your tenants, you have a strategy or you have a process, a bad tenant now can make your life miserable because you can't get rid of them. If they have the just cause, sorry about that. I think you want to make your contracts airtight. If a tenant's going to contest your contract, you're going to have to go to a small claims court. You want to make sure your contract is correct. Make sure your units to code. It's going to be easy for tenants to call housing authorities and make them effect repairs. Here's what I'm a big believer in. The state just took away some of your rights as a private property owner, but you still have one good right, and that is you can collect 2 months rent as your security deposit. I don't know why owners don't do this, and we offer a program to help them. I'll talk about later, but I think you should really, really try to get 2 months security deposit. And the reason is, of course, is that your tenant signs a 1-year lease. Last month they say, I'm not going to pay. Use my security deposit as my rent, and you can get angry. You can try to evict them, but by the time you evict them, they'd be gone already. But if you have 2 months, you have recourse against them. Some of our owners are thinking about getting out of Dodge. They're thinking about selling in California and buying in San Antonio, Texas. You can do that if you want to. But I would say rather than doing that, I would consider hiring a professional property management company like us. And we'll talk about that. So why consider progressive property management? First of all, we have centralized operations. I'm speaking to you right now from my main office in Placentia, California, but we have 20 branches from Apple Valley down to Temecula. So we have local property managers who are our boots on the ground, who are within a few minutes of your rental property, but centralized operations. We think we can be more efficient that way. More importantly, we can be everywhere in Southern California. Outside of Coachella and a few outlying areas, we can cover pretty much any rental property now in Southern California, excluding San Diego. We have resources here. So we have a maintenance company, we have an inspection company, we now have an insurance company. We have a lot of resources here to make sure we offer the highest standards to you. And probably most importantly, when I got this business, I went out and I sent surveys out to investment property owners randomly. And I said, what are you looking for in a property management company? What would it take for you, if you're self-managing, to hire a property management company? And here's what they told me. They wanted value propositions, total transparency, great customer service, and fair pricing. And if you offered that as a property management company, they'd be willing to listen to you. So I think we've done that, and I'll kind of explore that a little bit. The key thing we do now that we didn't do even a few years ago is that we offer programs. Optional programs to owners and tenants. And these programs are meant to heal pain points, issues that come up in our industry. For example, eviction protection. So we charge our tenants $15 a month, and if we have to evict the tenant, we pay for it. We can't charge you, the owner. The Department of Real Estate has said that's not allowed, but I can certainly charge your tenant. And that gives you some, knowing that your maximum you're going to pay for an eviction might be a couple $100 now. We have a preferred tenant program. I mentioned that I believe strongly you should get 2 months security deposit. For all of our rentals, if a tenant can't come up with those 2 months, then I charge them 1% of the rent. So if the rent's $2,000, I'm going to charge them $20 a month. And I'm going to guarantee the second month's security deposit to you, that $2,000. So if they have $3,000 in damages, we've got the security deposit of $2,000, I'm going to kick in the other $1,000. But here's the good news to the tenant. if they leave the property in good condition, I'll rebate them half that fee. So they're incentivized to do the right thing, and you have the protection of 2 months security deposit. You've got to have tenant liability insurance. You've got to make sure the tenant has insurance so that if they cause damage to your unit, that you're protected. You don't have to use your insurance because you're going to have a deductible, sometimes of $5,000. But more importantly, if you have more than 2 claims, more than 1 claim on your property may be uninsurable. Your insurance might go through the roof. But if your tenant has liability insurance, and we require all of our tenants to pay for liability insurance through us or through their own provider, you're better protected. And you should have a tenant guarantee. I believe ultimately our job, yes, we collect rents, yes, we enforce the contract, yes, we do all the stuff you expect a management company to do, but most importantly, we protect your investment asset. A lot of our owners, it's a $700,000 property in Mission Viejo, and the rents, call it $3,000. And they want that, in 20 years, they want that property to pay for their retirement, pay for their kids' weddings, pay for the unexpected. So we believe our biggest job is to protect your financial asset. And we do that through programs. We do that through insurance. We do that through our systems we have. Because I think we are the wall. The more we are the only contact point to your tenant, the more you're less liable you're going to be in case of a lawsuit. If we're making decisions on your behalf, picking the tenant, deciding on the security deposit, enforcing the contract, you're going to be better protected legally. So I talked about this a little earlier about the pillars of our company after I sent out a number of resumes: value, transparency, service, and price. And we'll dig a little deeper on that. So the 4 pillars, I believe what I heard from investment property owners, particularly investment property owners who were self-managing, is they wanted to trust the property management company. So we offer value propositions that create that trust. So if we don't behave as promised, we pay a real financial price. They wanted to believe us. So we are totally transparent with the world, with our owners, with tenants. And I'll show you a couple examples of that. I think you want to like us. You want to like your property management company. You want to like that they're doing a good job for you. And I believe customer service is paramount. And that's the most important thing to me, is that we're taking care of both our owners and tenants. And you wanted a fair price. And I'm willing to share with you right now what we charge for our property management services to everybody out there, no matter what your property, where it's located. I think Warren Buffett said this, that without value, it all comes down to price. I know price is important, and I know you demand a fair price, but if we offer some value to you as well, that should be a game changer. We do offer 8 performance guarantees. So if we don't perform as promised, we pay a real financial price. And I'll show those briefly to you. So these are in our management contract. So if we don't turn your rent out immediately, we'll waive our management fee. If we don't respond to a call, email, or text within 24 hours, we waive our management fee for that month. If you're not happy with us, you can cancel at any time. So these are all these guarantees we offer that are in your contract, and I can share them with you. Better yet, we're completely transparent with both you, tenants, and the whole world. And the best place for that is our website. That's a best indicator of our transparency, but we try to be it all the time in every way possible. If you go to our website, we have a place for owners and properties we manage. You can see if we manage properties in Fullerton, Long Beach, Pasadena. It's right there on a map. So you feel confident we do cover your area. I'm so confident that how we do business is competitive with my other property management companies in your area that I have a comparison chart. And you can not only see our pricing, you have links to our website, to our Yelp reviews, to the BRE, the Department of Real Estate. So that way you can quickly and easily compare us to other companies in your area. And I try to pick the best of the best. I try to go in and Google and find the big companies out there. We're not always the lowest, but we try to be very competitive. Reviews, we're always asking owners and clients who are happy with us to tell the world that's our experience, and we're always working on it. This is interesting. I recently rolled out to a new type of pricing. I call it hybrid pricing. So I'll go over this quickly. So there used to be two types of pricing: fixed pricing or percentage pricing. So either I charge you $125 a month flat fee, whether your rent is $1,200 or $5,000, that's $125. Or most companies prefer to percentage pricing. So I'm going to charge you 5% of the rent. So if the rent's $1,200, that's $60, and if it's $5,000, it's $250. That's called a percent pricing. I wasn't happy with either, and here's why. Particularly percent. So if your rental is $3,000, that's $150. But if your rental is $1,500, that's $75. Is it really twice as much work to manage the two? I'm probably not getting paid enough on the lower property and probably charging too much on the higher end property. So I didn't feel it was a good balance. So we moved to a hybrid pricing model. And all that means is that we charge a flat monthly fee plus a percent of rent collected. What I like about it, no matter where your property is located, no matter how much your monthly rent, everybody pays the same at Progressive. Everybody pays here $75 a month plus 2% of collected rent. So once again, if your rent were $2,000, that's $75 plus $40 be $115. If you're a multi-unit 16 plus, that goes down, obviously. That would go down to $45 a unit plus 2%, if that applies to you. But most of our property owners are single family and up to about 8 units. So everybody pays the same. Here's a nice little graph that shows you graphically comparing us to 6% or 125. And you can see we're a little bit higher on the low than, say, a flat fee, 6% flat fee, but we're lower on the high. I like it, and I think it's absolutely fair to our clients and to us, and it's been embraced wonderfully by our clientele. If you're not ready for full property management, we're okay with that. What we'll do, we do have other companies out there. We have an association management company. We do inspections. We have insurance, we have a maintenance company. So if you have other needs, reach out to us and perhaps we can help you. We do a local landlord seminar. We used to try to do them every 3 months. We're going to roll one out here in a couple of months. And it's a way for local property owners to come to our building. And we kind of do what I'm doing here, a little bit more detail. We take a lot of questions and we have other experts here. And it's a really no cost, no pressure, just sharing information, and we'll be doing one about every 3 months here in the Placentia office, and usually about 40 or 50 homeowners come to talk about their investment property. Because if you own investment property and you're self-managing, you're bound by the same laws I am. So you better know those laws. You better know what AB 1482 says you've got to do. You've got to know about fair housing laws. You got to know about when do you post and how many days and all that kind of stuff. We think we can do it better, and we like to share that with you at that time. We don't, we do it, I think, very gently. And lastly, we do talk about getting richer in real estate. For example, I'm starting right now a syndication group called Carpe Diem Developers. So it's a way to get, say, 10 or 20 investors together, pool their money. Let's go buy a multi-unit building that's 20% below market. Let's get it up to market over a 5-year period, and that way your risk is low. So let's say you initially put in $100,000, and after the first refinance you get back $50,000, and after the second refinance you get back $30,000. So after 5 years you only have $20,000 at risk at a $1.5 million property. So it's a local real estate investment trust, really what it is, syndication. But we talk about how you can get richer in real estate. That's what it looks like. That's my office, and that's how many people come in. It's the last slide. I got you out for an hour. Hopefully you found this worthwhile, but we take it seriously that our slogan is that we manage happiness. Maybe you're not a client right now, but maybe in a year or two you got a tenant who's difficult, or you get tired of doing it yourself, or you move out of area, and you realize for $75 a month plus 2%, that's a fair price to pay to protect your asset. What's more important, an extra $100 in revenue, or protecting your $800,000 asset because of the programs we offer and the tools and the insurance? So that's for you to decide. But I want to thank you for spending your time learning about the California renter state, and feel free to reach out to me or to my team if you have other questions, or of course if you're looking for professional property management. Thanks.